What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto's anger awakened the divine parts of creation inside him? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. The world was about to witness its most epic battle. In one barren area near the edge of a cliff, two figures were standing on two separate stone edges. The silence that engulfed the area was as loud as the roar of the mightiest animal. Not that there were any animals in the area, however. The land behind these two figures was barren, desolate and bare. The rocky plains was a result from a chakra bomb produced from the rampaging deity before these two. There were no trees, there were no animals, and if it wasn't for the two figures standing on top of 10-meter-high outcropping rocks, there would be no life. Though there was no sun for them to see each other with, but that was okay. They didn't need to see each other, only what was about to unleash its primal fury on them. The first figure on one of the rocks was wearing a white, full-length haori with a black shirt, beneath which he wore a necklace which was also made up of 6 magatama. He had short, spiky pale red hair along with eyes that had a black dot as a pupil, a purple sclera and iris with 4 rings that spread out from the pupil. He also sported a trimmed goatee. He had horns on his head that were several centimeters above the skin, along with a light-colored circle on his right palm and a dark crescent moon on his left. A katana without a guard was in a black sheath at his waist and purple cloth wrapped around the black hilt. A shakuho was in his right hand held in a firm grip. The gold rings on the staff were still. The man's eyes were set firmly in front of him, not wavering, barely blinking, unmoving. On the second rock was another man that was also following his companion's lead and staring firmly ahead with his pure white eyes. The horns on his forehead were roughly the same size as the other man on the rock beside him, if not a tad bit smaller. Wearing a white full-length haori with a high collar, much like the older sibling beside him, along with dark pants and shirt. Just visible near the sleeves of his haori, on his arms were 2 strange arm bracers, made with leather, yet there was also metal poking out beneath the sleeves. His long, waist-length, white hair that went down his back didn't hide the katana he also had sheathed at his waist, though he did nothing to hide it either. A staff similar to the other man's was also enclasped in left hand. The object of their focus could only be described as some sort of gigantic demon, a creature whose appearance looked so simple and bland yet so horrific that it would creep on one's nightmare for all eternity. The creature had 4 thick legs that held its titanic body off the ground. As each limb impacted the ground, it left a crater. The 4 legs, however, looked more like hands than feet, while the hind legs were reminiscent of a dog's. 10 tails swung behind its body as it moved, each one having the ability to knock down mountains with ease. Both men had seen the beast do that on the way towards them. In the front of its head, looking at the 2 standing figures, was a single eye that rested above a mouth with teeth that could make a shark look like it had baby teeth in comparison. With the red sclera and iris along with 4 ripples that spread out from the dot-like pupil and the 12 tomo that were spread out along the ripples, it reminded both men of their mother's 3rd tomo eye and the Rinnegan combined. The most worrying thing about the entity before them was the intense output of raw, godlike power that it seemed to exclude from its body. The power of a living, mobile force of nature, the power of a god. So, this is the true form of the Shinju? The older red-haired man remarked. It was misheard by the 2 white-clothed men, but the beast in the distance snickered, though it came out as its usual growl, if only a bit more high-pitched. "It appears so, brother," the white-haired man replied. "We have trained so long for this." He continued, "Our mother dedicated her whole life to train us against this monstrosity. We shouldn't disappoint her." Hagoromo didn't respond straight away, leaving the 2 of them in silence for several seconds, only disturbed by the increasingly loud booms as the legs of the primordial entity hit the ground broke the silence. Hagoromo then turned his rippled eyes towards his brother. Hamura. Hagoromo was finding it hard to swallow as he talked. "Whatever happens in this battle, know that you will always be my brother, and that if I had any way to die besides the sands of time, it would be to fight by your side." As Hagoromo finished, his voice was thick with emotion as he looked towards his brother who had turned towards him, staring at him with his colorless eyes. Hamura then smiled. "Same here, brother, same here," said the younger sibling, his own voice only a whisper compared to his brother's loud declaration, yet it contained the same amount of raw emotion. Hamura said nothing back, choosing to jump up from his rock, rocketing high up into the sky and over the Shinju, its eye tracking him as he ascended. Hagoromo knew what his brother was going to do and acted accordingly. Gathering his chakra, Hagoromo thrust both of his hands diagonally upwards towards the Jubi, causing a pillar of earth to mirror his movements, shooting up like a spear towards its target. Or it would have, until a circle of its skin glowed a pale white and quickly absorbed the chakra-enhanced earth into itself. Hagoromo frowned at this. They had prepared for the possibility that the Shinju could absorb chakra, but it didn't make him like it any more than he already did, which wasn't a lot. Their arsenal was severely limited, an arsenal that mostly relied on their chakra. As the Shinju's single eye turned its gaze to him, Hagoromo was happy that his attack did its job. To act as a distraction. Even though it was focused on the small figure standing on large rock, the Jubi was still well aware of the other source of its stolen chakra descending over its head but paid it no mind. Why should it? It was a primordial entity, a force of nature. What could two pitiful creatures, that hadn't even lived a fraction of its lifetime, do to him? Its question was answered when the chakra that was descending over its head impacted with the force of a mountain. Himura's chakra-infused fist struck the center of its head with enough force that it could rival an earthquake. Taken off guard by the power of the descending fist, the front limbs of the beast buckled, causing its head to hit the ground with boom. That was what differentiated Hamura from Hagoromo. While the older brother decided to rely more on chakra-produced elemental attacks like his mother, while the younger brother, who lacked the Rinnegan that enabled mastery over all 5 elements, decided to focus more on physical attacks due to his perfect chakra control. Hamura, though he had not inherited the Rinnegan, he had inherited his mother's Byakugan, which allowed him to have a clearer perception and understanding of chakra in its purest state compared to his older brother. It saddened Hagoromo that this battle would rely more on Himura's physical attacks rather than his ranged attacks. It frustrated him that he could not help his brother to his fullest capabilities. He simply watched on as the beast's head lowered a bit, barely preventing itself from hitting the ground. It seemed that it could only absorb chakra it knew was coming, and unexpected chakra-based attacks could work or only if the chakra was already outside the body. He prayed that it wasn't the former, otherwise it would hamper his brother's capabilities as well. But now that they proved to the thing that they were an actual threat, he doubted that they'd get another shot at a surprise attack. So it was all the same. As his brother landed next to him on his rock after flying back using his ability over wind, Hagoromo explained what he'd discovered. It seems that it can absorb chakra it knows it coming, much like I can. However, if caught off guard it can get hit by a chakra attack. Hagoromo explained to his brother, who simply nodded. His younger brother had probably already come to this conclusion about the beast's chakra-absorbing abilities. Both men's attention was drawn back to the Shinju when they felt a shudder run through the earth and looked upon the 10 tails already on 3 legs and just finishing to put its 4th back onto solid ground. Both noted there was barely a scratch on the crown of its head, despite the power in which it was hit. As it stood, the beast let off a terrifying roar, one that split the heavens themselves, much to his shock. When the shock waves produced by its roar reached them, the many rocks below and near them were instantly shattered as they were blown a few meters away, forced to fly up to the cliff behind them. Something else the brothers soon found out was that it wasn't just a roar either. As soon as the beast finished they felt the wind pick up and start to roar, the ground shake and tremble like it was the act of Kami, and the clouds twist and swirl towards their direction. After several seconds of trying to maintain their balance on the rapidly crumbling rock, both Hagoromo and Hamura were forced to jump again to either side as one of 10 tails crashed onto their position, cracking the ground around it and creating a shockwave that destroyed even more of the earth. Both males had to once again dodge as 2 separate tails came at both of them, once again destroying the ground around the site of impact, namely the cliff they were standing on. When the next tail come swooping at them, both males were ready, now on either side of the Jubi. Both nimbly jumped out of the way while launching an attack, Hagoromo launching several small jet black projectiles, while Hamura channeled pure black lightning through his body and directed it towards his fist and went on to punch the mighty beast. The single-eyed beast let out a roar of annoyance more than pain, as if annoyed at the 2 brothers for hurting it. What happened next was too fast for Hagoromo to fully comprehend. The Jubi opened its mouth, close to unhinging its jaw, and formed a dark purple and black cone of what could have only been chakra and launched it at Hamura. The cone then shot out at Hamura like a beam that impacted the earth with force the likes Hagoromo had never seen. The beam dug through the earth, crashing into Hamura and taking him along with it. The explosion that then took place next could only be described as the power of a god. The crater was larger than the beast itself, and the heat that was given off was enough to crack the ground for several kilometers in any direction. It took several seconds before the dome of the blast finally subsided. What was then visible could only be described as the act of a vengeful god. The entire area that was caught in the blast was flattened. What was once a rocky plain was now just flat and barren land. There was nothing there, including his brother. At first Hagoromo felt nothing. That was for about a second before he was overcome by pure rage by the likes he had never felt before. This thing had just killed his brother. It had killed his brother. He would have vengeance. Pushing his arm out so that his palm was facing towards the Shinju, Hagoromo decided to start right now. Shinra Tensai, almighty push. He roared, forcing chakra through his arm. The repulsive force flew invisible through the air, only disturbing the ground slightly before crashing into the Jubi. The force struck with the beast-like rage he had behind it, launching the hulking figure of the Shinju a kilometer or so away. But even then Hagoromo gave it no time to rest. Still burning with righteous anger, he leapt after the 10-tailed beast, covering the distance in a few minutes. Landing just before the one-eyed god, Hagoromo whipped his hands forward. Large purple chakra chains erupted from his wrists and hands that then charged the recovering Shinju and started to wrap around the beast and its tails, restraining it tightly, as per their user's will. Unfortunately for Hagoromo, he forgot about one of the 10 tails that were attached to the body. The only notice he had was the blurring of brown out of the corner of his left eye, before he closed his eyes and braced himself for impact. There was pain, but it wasn't from him but instead from the Jubi still trapped in Hagoromo's chains. Taking a chance and opening his eyes, Hagoromo looked towards where he saw the tail coming from and was shocked. Pieces of earth had shot up through the ground and pierced the tail that was coming to was about to turn him into a smear, temporarily stopping it. "Hagoromo, move out of the way right now," said a strained voice, a voice that a few minutes ago, he thought he would never hear again, his brother. Several parts of his chakra-produced pure white clothes were ripped along with several cuts and bruises, but other than that he looked fine, his cuts already healing thanks to his innate healing ability. His apparently not dead brother had his hands buried in the ground. "Hamura," Hagoromo breathed. "How?" he asked, confused yet glad at the same time. "A chakra shield," Hamura whispered out with great strain. Hagoromo understood the reason. Quickly releasing his chains, Hagoromo leapt back from the Shinju, now unrestrained, quickly started to stand, now determined to squash the bugs that were proving to be an annoyance. Hamura then stopped reinforcing the earth spikes, which quickly snapped under the strength of its tail. Hagoromo and Hamura quickly regrouped, just as the Jubi was getting back onto its feet. "Hagoromo, we have to set up the seal. There's no way we stand a chance without it," Hamura said quickly while eyeing the rising Shinju. "Yes, I agree," Hagoromo replied while also eyeing their foe. "I shall start to set up the seal now, while you keep it contained in this area. Remember, if even a single seal is sufficiently damaged, the seal will blow up with the combined power of everything I put into it as well as the natural energy that is in the area," he said seriously. "If they screwed up here, everything would be over. Either due to a gigantic chakra-produced explosion or, if the 10-tailed beast was still present due to the seal failing, a raging smash of its tail. If the seal failed, it would not only endanger the life of both of them, but potentially the lives of every person and animal in the world. Seriously, the rampage entity before them was said to produce the planet itself from its roots. It wouldn't be ridiculous to say that the energy it used to create the planet couldn't be used to destroy it. It was also something that they couldn't set up on the spot, as the seals would have to be in perfect condition, and if it was preset, the Shinju could have damaged it. Luckily for them, the seal was set to circle around the target and could be as big as the sealer, in this case Hagoromo, wanted. The downside was that the Shinju had to be kept occupied so that the Hagoromo could focus on placing the seals. This meant that Hamura had to keep the Jubi focused on him, which would be incredibly tough considering the power it wielded. But even though it would be almost impossible, it was their best shot at defeating the beast. Hamura had took off towards the 10 tails, who had by now gotten back up onto its feet and was tracking Himura's approach with its single eye. It knew now that these two were somewhat of a threat to it. It would have to deal with them to accomplish its self-appointed mission of retrieving what was originally its chakra from that woman. It had pondered about the other human that was running away from it but quickly discarded the idea of pursuing it. It would eventually get its stolen chakra back, that it knew for certain. Hamura stopped 100 meters or so away from the brown creature. If Hagoromo wanted a distraction, he'd get one. Placing his palms out, his eyes glowed a light green as the wind in front of him quickly started to rotate in a circular motion, forming a funnel for a rapidly growing tornado. It took mere seconds before the tornado was complete, picking up dust and rocks to be sucked inside its funnel. It was his own powers over wind that was stopping him from sharing the fates of those rocks. He held the natural force of wind in his grasp, with his ripped haori blowing crazily behind him. Willing it, he launched the tornado at his foe that had been mostly ignoring the many rocks and other debris that had hit it when they became caught in the winds of the tornado. Noticing the tornado, the Shinju intended to just weather the storm like it did the rocks. It was capable of producing much more powerful tornadoes, so of course it could withstand it. Hamura flung his arms up into the air, his eyes turning dirt brown and calling forth the earth to do his bidding. It rose in front of him like a tsunami, soaring into the sky and matched the Shinju in height. The beast was still shrugging the tornado off with ease, but it had just noticed the wave-like attack of earth. Said wave of earth quickly charged forward and crashed into the behemoth, causing it to crumble under the weight and force of the rock. However, Hamura knew that his earth attack would not do anything to truly hurt the creature. It would simply heal after all. None of their earlier attacks had even left a mark on the beast. However, he acted when the opportunity presented itself. He focused on the ground around the 10 tails, wanting to try and restrain the beast. He knew that restraining it for as long as possible would be the best option for both him and Hagoromo, as any small bit of flying debris could disrupt the ceiling or Hagoromo. Keeping it restrained for the longest possible time is the smartest thing to do in this situation. The 10-tailed creature struggled to move from under the gigantic slab of earth, roaring out its frustration, before suddenly it went slack. Hamura was immediately on guard. There was no way that it would give up, so that only meant that it was planning something or using an ability of some sort. Hamura inwardly prayed it wasn't the ability to fly. The seal wouldn't work on a flying target. He sighed out, mentally thanking some unknown deity, when his trapped foe didn't take off from the ground, but instead started to spawn much smaller versions of itself that were able to slip through spaces in between the broken pieces of earth. The clones varied in size and shape, yet they all had the same intimidating features, not to mention they were all rapidly charging towards his position. He inwardly cursed, of all the things the damn abilities it had to be minions. Hagoromo was more specialized in dealing with multiple targets. Hopefully Hagoromo wasn't too focused in finishing the seal. Hagoromo! Hamura shouted behind him, using chakra to enhance his voice to shout the distance between them. Minions! Several kilometers away riding seals on the bare earth, Hagoromo heard his brother's voice and turned to look in his direction and instantly noticed what the problem was. Hundreds and hundreds of what looked like miniature 10 tails, just without the tails. Hagoromo inwardly cursed. This would make his job that much harder, but at least they could bring in some help, and though he was reluctant to admit it, he thanked that they were more focused on his brother than him. In a grand boisterous gesture, Hagoromo quickly focused his chakra into his hand and had formed 2 extra arms completely comprised of white chakra. With all 3 hands, he formed 3 different seals simultaneously while releasing immense amounts of chakra. Tengai Shinsei, heavenly obstacle quaking star. There was a delayed reaction, but he soon looked up as the dark clouds suddenly split apart, only to reveal a massive meteorite directly above the minion spawns. It was definitely time to get the hell out of here. The huge meteor had impacted and promptly squatted the hundreds of minion spawns, while also creating a huge shock wave of wind and smoke, blowing him away. The beast, however, protected by the debris of Earth, was unaffected by the shock wave and had taken advantage of its captor's loss of focus on its earthly prison. Taking advantage of that one moment of weakness to start slamming its multiple tails against the weakened bars, draining their strength further. Hamura was too busy trying to regain his balance and had not noticed his prison being on the verge of breaking. The Jubi flexed its legs and the debris shattered like glass shattering into millions of pieces, and the one-eyed god roared in satisfaction that it was finally free of that infernal rough cage. That satisfaction was interrupted however when it felt another buildup of chakra, quickly turning its single eye to look at the source. It was greeted a bright flash of light struck it straight in the eye with enough power to take down a mountain. The beast released an animalistic yell that shook the earth and the sky alike. It was time to take these humans seriously, it would destroy them now. These humans needed to die. Its eye was quickly healed, and the 10 tails wasted no time in reminding the two mortals why it was a god. Its tails arched over its head before crashing into the area the nearest human was flying in. The earthquake that resulted from the slamming of the tails could be heard around the world. It had felt the soft, fragile skin familiar to only humans against its tail when it had attacked. Finally it had succeeded. Hamura had managed to get out of the shock wave unscathed, but he had not regained his focus in time to notice the huge tail ready to smash itself against him. Damn it, the beast had taken him off guard with how quick it had recovered as well, and unfortunately for him, he wasn't able to get out of there in time. He erected a chakra shield around himself, now he could only brace himself for the attack. But his shield was unable to withstand the brute force behind the attack. It had shattered within moments of impact and almost immediately, he had felt the tail smash up against his skin. Thankfully he had went through the earth which had protected his body to the extent that the Jubi's tail had not squished his body like a fly being swatted. But his bones, God, his bones. He could feel several ribs and other bones in his limbs break under the pressure of its attack. If it wasn't from the vitality, endurance and enhanced body gained from his Otsutsuki lineage, he would have died right there. Now, his body was healing his barely visible body. Though he prayed the Jubi wouldn't actively search for him. His healing factor wouldn't be able to recover him in time if the Jubi decided to capitalize on its advantage. Unlike last time however, his prayers were ignored when he felt the behemoth above him gather chakra in front of its mouth. Chakra in amounts more bigger and denser than he had ever felt before. Damn it. It was forming into a ball, but what really made Hamura worry was that the chakra that was being used to form the ball was quite literally ripping up the ground in the process, to the extent that the pierced earth revealed his battered body. Where was Hagoromo? Did he get blown away by the shockwave from earlier? Above him, he glanced upon the fearsome beast with visible fear on his face. He could see the beast's one eye twitch in a similar fashion to someone else's eye if they were also smiling. Suddenly he heard a loud yell from his brother. Hamura. He could feel his brother's chakra signature close in on them. But it was too late, the beast would finish its attack before his brother would arrive, much less stop the condensed super-powered attack above him. Quickly deciding on what he had to do, Hamura used an element that was easily one of the more complicated ones. Placing his hands out in front of him, slightly cupped, Hamura focused on gathering chakra quickly as he knew he needed to fire before the Shinju did. It formed into a cone pointing up towards the purple-black ball of chakra. As the 10-tailed beast finished with its attack and was about to launch it, a large surge of chakra from beyond its vision made it hesitate for 1 second, and it was 1 second that it would remember for the rest of its existence. Die! Hamura screamed and released the technique he had created, a large cone structure that guided a beam of transparent light straight towards ball the Shinju was creating. The result of the two attacks colliding would stay in the mind of Naruto, Hagoromo and the Jubi forever. The attacks collided, creating an explosion of unprecedented scales. The Jubi and Hamura who had erected a barrier of earth from around him in a poor attempt to protect himself as well as digging himself further below ground level. The Jubi who was now ironically the closest to the explosion, took the worst of the damage. It was quickly consumed by the blast, hidden from view, though its primal roars of pain would give those around the world an idea to what it was feeling. Hamura, though he was now 100 meters below ground level, had also been caught by the explosion. He had once again created a sphere around him completely made of chakra, reinforcing it with everything he had before the blast would eradicate his already battered body. The few minions that had survived were quickly destroyed from the power of the blast. Hagoromo got knocked back a few feet from the force of the explosion, his distance from the explosion reducing due to the force of the shockwave, but the blast had done the damage. It had knocked him out temporarily. When Hamura first opened his eyes, all he saw was a bright light quickly blinking, He was relieved that the brightness started to recede before completely disappearing, and he was greeted by the clouded sky. To his amazement, a crater of a few hundred kilometers had formed around him. He had barely survived. He wanted to stand up, but he couldn't. He wanted to see why, but when he glanced down to his body he became horrified. He had lost the bottom half of his body. The realization hit him as the pain came back to him. It was so excruciatingly painful. He had to let it out, somehow. He relied on instinct. Letting out a scream of pain. He could only sit there and watch as the primordial beast shook itself off from the slabs of earth, seemingly unharmed. Suddenly, despair hit him. It was foolish to think they even had a chance. Especially against the primordial being that created the planet itself. Damn it, this was not how they had envisioned the fight. Never in their life, not once in their life had they ever been this badly outmatched. The one-eyed beast closed in on him, its triumphant smirk clearly visible on its hideous visage. Looming above him, its eye was directed towards where he assumed his brother was. Until its gaze was again directed at him, its smirk growing ever more wider. It opened its mouth and lowered its head towards him. Fuck, this thing was going to eat him. As he stared into the abyss of the Jubi's mouth and had desperately tried to crawl away futilely. He heard the scream of his brother from the distance. The last thing he heard was, "Brother RRRR." Before he was swallowed whole by the primordial beast, Hagoromo had just recovered from his short state of unconsciousness. He groggily woke up while shaking off the huge rubble on top of him. Only to see the huge beast in the middle of the huge crater resulting from the biggest explosion he had ever seen. It was moving its head down slowly as if, below it, oh no. He could only scream out as he flew towards the Jubi. Brother RRRR. He had to do something. Anything. But it was too late. The beast had ate him, throwing its head up to digest his brother easier as it made a huge sound. Gulp. It had ate his brother. His family. The emotional stress had hit him like a meteorite 3 times bigger than Earth. His powers failed him right then and there, unable to focus properly due to his turmoil. He fell, his powers of flight also failing, right next to the seal, the ace they had up their sleeves. But what was the point? One of the main reasons he was fighting for had just been eaten. If his powers couldn't do anything to protect his family, then what was the point? He had felt the gaze if the Jubi suddenly fall upon him. He could actually see since his own head was still focused on the ground. But he could feel the naturally immense and oppressive aura of the primordial god fully focus on him. It was over. The hopes his mother had placed on him and his younger brother, they had both failed her. Once more, he had felt the shaking of the earth, signifying that the colossal beast was once again mobile. It had set its sights on him. He looked up faintly, weakly. He couldn't muster up a single attack. No matter how much he wanted to avenge his brother, the fresh death of Hamura stung him. Deep down, subconsciously, he knew his depression far exceeded his desire for vengeance. In this state, he couldn't do anything to defend himself. But suddenly, he could no longer feel the frequent shaking of the earth. He heard the roar, though it sounded more like a scream of pain. The Jubi was in pain right now. It had never felt like this before. The literally gut-wrenching pain was excruciating. That half-dead human it ate before. That insect must have been the problem. It tried to focus internally on the location of the human in the middle of its body. It needed to eliminate this problem once and for all. That other human that looked so similar to the one it ate, the Jubi didn't even consider it a threat. If that human was as strong as the one it ate, then there was no way it could cause the same amount of pain as the one in its body was inflicting right now. Hagoromo looked onto the side of the Jubi clenching what was equivalent to a human's stomach in pain. He was vexed at first, but then he realized something, or had at least hoped it was true. The Jubi wasn't like normal sentients like animals or humans. The Jubi was a god. It probably didn't even have a heart, or any organs like a stomach. That meant his brother could be alive. It was the only explanation of why the Jubi was suddenly feeling something equivalent to a stomachache. That low possibility brought hope to his depressed state. He tried using his senjutsu-enhanced sensory abilities, only way you can sense the Jubi or anything inside it, to locate his brother. But it was no use. The Jubi was literally the mother lode of all chakra. In that massive void of chakra there was no way he could sense his brother's chakra, which was a tiny smidgen compared to the amount the Jubi had. This battle had humbly taught him that. His brain nearly exploded from the sheer overload of sensing that much chakra. It's always made me wonder how Naruto could still function properly after he sensed the Jubi's chakra. It was sentimental of him. But he couldn't help but think his brother had sacrificed himself in order to allow him this opportunity. His priorities were set straight now, his determination to do things right came back full blast. The beast had stopped, this was his chance to complete the seal. A chance his brother provided him with his life. He couldn't waste it any longer. Too much time had been lost because he wasted time worrying for his brother. "I'm sorry. Forgive me, brother." It was ironic that he had been weeping earlier for the death of his brother only to find out moments later that he would be the one finishing off the deed of killing his brother. But the earlier sentiment he had reminded him of one last thing. There was no way he could waste his brother's sacrifice. Not when millions of lives were at stake. He resumed the construction of his sealing array. Only a few more minutes till its completion. A few minutes later, the Jubi had finally ceased the pain. The infernal insect it had just ate finally silenced. Now it could focus in the other human. It looked forward only to see the human writing something strange on the ground. The scribblings looked harmless, but something inside told it that those scribbling were dangerous. That human had to be stopped. But it was too late. Hagoromo had just finished the sealing array. It was time to finish this. Slamming his left palm onto the ground, he focused chakra onto the first seal of the array. The rest of the sealing symbols started moving through the ground as they combined and imprinted themselves onto the center of his palm. Focusing more chakra, the black ink of the combined seal glowed white with his chakra. He directed his palm towards the incoming beast and shot out several huge chains, originating from the seals themselves. They stabbed themselves onto the Jubi's skin, but seeing as it was so hard, his chains may as well have been sticking onto the Jubi's skin instead. But that was all right. As long as the chains combined with the intended effects of the seal made contact with its target, the seals would still trigger itself nonetheless. He could feel the chains absorbing, pulling, on the chakra of the Jubi at a tremendous pace quickened by the seals themselves. The Jubi could feel its chakra being stolen from it once again. Only this time, a more significant amount was being taken. Already it could feel itself reverting to its weaker form. It had to do something to stop this. Hagoromo felt the Jubi's withering lessen in force. Less. Then, miraculously, it stopped. He couldn't feel any chakra from the behemoth before him. Weird, that was way too fast. He could have sworn the Jubi had more chakra than what was in the palm of his hand right now. But right now, his mind was focusing more on containing the chakra gathered within the seal on his palm or otherwise risk a chakra explosion bigger than the last one. Quickly, he slammed the palm that contained the seal onto his stomach after he had ripped the top half of his haori with his right hand. An intricate circular seal appeared around his belly. The divine chakra gathered within his palm quickly transferred to the seal on his stomach. Success. He looked onto the former beast in front of him in order to confirm that the Jubi was no longer there. No longer was there a four-legged beast of destruction, because in its place was a wrinkly dry husk. It lacked the 10 tails. Replaced by several wood-like spikes growing out of its back. It lacked the true, original Rinnegan pattern. Its eye was replaced by 9 slits. It lacked the overwhelming aura that he had associated with the Jubi. He had done it. The Jubi would no longer be a threat to the lives of this planet. But he was snapped out of his daze when overwhelming pain came from his chest. He clutched his stomach in a futile attempt to block out the pain. A warm feeling was rising out of its chest which gathered in his mouth. On instinct, he spat it out, it was blood. Once more that feeling came, as he gurgled out more blood. He fell to his knees as both his hands supported his body, preventing his face from hitting the ground. Temporarily ignoring the pain in favor of finding out the source of the pain. He looked at his left hand and chest, both which had started feeling weird. He was shocked when he gazed upon stone. His hand and stomach had turned into stone. What was this phenomenon? Was it the Jubi? This was not what they were expecting. Was the Jubi's chakra harmful to their body? It couldn't be because of this sheer amount. The seal had protected his body from exploding due to that, and he was pretty sure the seals were functioning properly. So what was it? Was this pain due to that divine, otherworldly quality he and his brother had sensed from the primordial god at the start? He had to exact the next plan in haste. Damn it, it was too soon for the humans to receive this gift. But he had to do it now, lest he wanted to turn into stone. Which he didn't. Quickly, before his whole body turned into stone, he formed a blue and red flame on his right and left hand respectively. He brought both flames together to form a purple-black sphere. He cried out, Banbutsu Sozo, creation of all things. Before the purple sphere scattered in many different directions, reaching every corner and cranny of the planet. But he had underestimated both the quality and quantity of the Jubi's chakra. Even after he had spread the Jubi's chakra around the world, more than 90% of it was still inside the seal on his stomach. He and his brother had underestimated the Jubi far too much. He didn't think he would have to resort to this plan. He was hoping that it would stop at where he spread chakra around the world. Quickly, visual images of 9 different yet distinct animals popped up in his mind. He repeated the earlier process and once again yelled out, Banbutsu Sozo, creation of all things. 9 giant purple spheres surrounded him as rocks started to from the ground started to gather around the spheres. Eventually they started to become distinct and large in size. Though all 9 statues were brown, they all had something in common. A fairly big stature, bigger than an adult human anyway, and tails, though they varied in numbers, from 1 to 9. The statue with 1 tails became a sand raccoon. The statue with 2 tails became a blue firecat. The statue with 3 tails turtles became a turtle crab. The statue with 4 tails became a red gorilla. The statue with 5 tails became a horse dolphin. The statue with 6 tails became a slug. The statue with 7 tails became a flying insect. The statue with 8 tails became a ox octopus. Finally, the one that contained most of the Jubi's stolen chakra, hence the most powerful of the 9 new beings, became a 9-tailed fox. Huff, huff, huff. He was so tired after this ordeal. Most of his lower body including his entire left arm became stone. But at least he had avoided death. The 9 beings that were a tad bit bigger than him were asleep. He would have to take care of them and teach them the values of peace so that they wouldn't rampage around the world like the Jubi when he was dead. He made an attempt to teleport them back to his secret training ground. His mother probably wouldn't take too kindly to the 9-tailed beings he had just created solely from the Jubi's chakra. After he had divided the Jubi's chakra, most of it contained in the 9-tailed beings around him, he could still feel something within the seal. It felt so pure. His own chakra, his brother's chakra and his mother's chakra felt pure. But the density and purity of the energy inside the seal was just amazing, transcendent even. It wasn't unique to the Jubi, that was for sure, since he could feel the same quality in his family's own chakra. But it was just so much purer. Was that why he was turning to stone before? What was it? He could also feel the same energies around the planet except they were so much lesser in amount compared to the amount in his seal. Without the Jubi's chakra, the energy in the seal wasn't lashing out anymore, it was just sitting in his seal idly. Ah! He cried out in frustration, he could think about this later. Right now it was time to focus on his space-time technique to teleport him and the 9 sleeping animal-like beings. It took much longer than expected, probably due to his exhaustion. While he was focusing however, he did not notice the dry husk of the Jubi behind him open its mouth. But what was most peculiar was what was inside it. 2 eyes peered out from inside the husk's mouth. 2 white eyes stared solely at Hagoromo, who was blissfully unaware of what was happening behind him. Hagoromo was still focusing, nearly pinpointing the location of his secret training ground with his chakra. Until steering pain once again hit him from his stomach. He looked down. A soft, pure white hand was sticking out of his stomach. A hand similar to his own. But where the hand was sticking out of was what he was most concerned about, it was sticking out of the seal. He could feel a pull on the energies inside it. His seal was breached. He tried using chakra to protect the energies inside his seal from being taken, but it was a mistake on his part. His chakra was now also being taken from him slowly, excruciatingly slowly. He felt so much weaker already. Slowly, he looked behind him and what he saw shocked him to the very core. It was his brother, alive, but that meant, his brother's hand was what pierced his stomach. His brother was the one killing him? Impossible, there was no way. Cough cough Hamura? The accusation obvious from his tone. The person that looked like his younger brother, he refused to admit his brother would try to kill him, didn't respond immediately. It took a few seconds, but the white-haired person smiled ominously as he spoke in his brother's voice, except it was more deeper than his brother's soft voice. "No, I'm not your brother." His feelings were mixed with relief that it wasn't his brother that was doing this and dread that something else was possessing his brother's body, the only conclusion that made sense in his situation. But what? What was possessing Hamura? He's still kind of in denial that someone is possessing Hamura, which is preventing him from making obvious conclusions. "You can call me Naruto, the Shinju Incarnate." He was now filled with dread at the implications. He, too, like his brother, had failed the world. The avatar of destruction was still here. He had failed. Impossible. But his denial just seemed to amuse the Shinju Incarnate. "Dude, I'm a god. Anything is possible for me." His joking tone, however, did nothing to get rid of Hagoromo's denial. Then what was that other form?" "Oh, that colossal form from earlier was my primal state. You can thank your mother for that." His mother? Sure, his mother told both him and Hamura that she stole the fruit in order to stop the ongoing wars, but how does that relate to the Shinju reverting to its primal form instead of this one for their battle? "Oh, you want an explanation? Sure, why not? Just let me do this and pretend we're chummy while I explain to you my story." Naruto pulled his hand from the man's belly. Hagoromo weakly fell to the floor after being deprived of most of his chakra, something that was with him ever since birth, so the lack of it may have exhausted the Otsutsuki beyond measure. "This state is my true one. I'm just using your brother's body as a substitute since I can't revert to my true form inside that husk behind me without my full power. After your mother stole the chakra fruit from me, something that took a lot of effort to grow, thank you very much, my chakra wasn't dense as usual. So I was forced to use my weaker berserk form where I substitute quantity over quality in my attacks. During the duration of our fight, I had just enough time to restore my chakra, which I then started transferring over to your brother, once I saw that seal of yours, so that I could be the host of his body. But how did you sneak up on me? I should have been able to still sense your presence as long as you still had chakra." Ha 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 ha. He cracked himself up. What this human had just said was hilarious yet so offensive at the same time. "You, being able to sense my divine chakra? Ha 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 ha. Oh, you humans are funny." He was wheezing so hard right now. "Please, just because you have my chakra you think you're hot shit now? Pathetic. My primal form is a lot weaker than my real form. Even now with half my chakra levels, I'm far stronger than what that 10-tailed form of mine is capable of. Even with half my chakra, in humanoid form the chakra inside my body becomes so condensed that I could literally destroy that meteorite you summoned earlier with one finger. In my humanoid form, my chakra becomes so pure and dense that your mortal brain would literally explode from sheer sensory overload. Thus your mind subconsciously prevents you from detecting any energy sources that would provide such an extreme reaction. One cannot detect a presence on a higher dimension, boy." He concluded with a condescending tone. For a human to think that they could do anything after having just a tiny and corrupted bit of his chakra, much less beat him, was pitiful. "But the seal should have taken all of your chakra." But deep down he knew he was wrong. He just knew that the process of stealing the Jubi's chakra was far quicker than expected. He should have made sure. "You know I'm trying to make a point here with all these insults about humans. I'd expect someone wielding my chakra to catch on. A human, no matter how powerful they may be, cannot contain my chakra, even with the assistance of that seal. The nature energy present in my chakra is in its purest state, free from human corruption. No human, unless their bodies have the same flesh as my real body, can use it without dying eventually." Hagoromo held a look of shock. "Please, there were many Otsutsukis who used seals before you. Though they didn't have chakra, meaning they didn't have much success, there were few breakthroughs when the seals used the nature energy gathered in the atmosphere." Nature energy, the Shinju Incarnate said it again. What was that? Just because the Otsutsuki brothers can use senjutsu doesn't mean they know what it's called. The powers they have were, after all, were stolen from the Shinju, so they can only use powers on an instinctual level. Peeved that look of stupidity present in every human. All you humans are the same. First chance of gaining or using power you take without a second glance, without taking the time to full understand those powers. Naruto despised this human before him. This Hagoromo, he knew the man's name from digging into this Himura's memories as well as the location of Kagaya Otsutsuki's home, was arrogant. When his hand came into contact with the man's body, He used 2 of the 6 paths of the Rinnegan to take back his chakra and steal the life force present in Hagoromo's body, as well as scanning through most of the dying man's memories. Hagoromo Otsutsuki was like any other human, worse even. The man was arrogant and worst of all naive, blinded to the truth of human nature due to believing in his own powers. He was so arrogant that he thought he could teach every human to achieve peace in 1.5 centuries at most. Humans were incapable of achieving peace. No matter how small, humans will always conflict with each other. Unless every human had the same traits, same interests, same ideals and the same habits and a drone-like mental state, it was impossible to gain peace, simply because it was impossible for interests between humans to stay the same forever, through natural means. What are you going to do now? It was a legitimate concern. Now that the Jubi was a lot smarter and apparently stronger, there was nothing to stop it. His mother couldn't fight the Shinju because her powers directly came from the Shinju, whilst the chakra they inherited from their mother was polluted due to the 9-month or so process of birth. Lest she wanted her chakra to be immediately sucked up by the primordial god. To kill your mother, of course. She's held onto my chakra for far too long. Then please spare the humans. Oh, don't worry, I won't harm the humans. But when they harm my planet with my chakra, which they will, I will come for them. A hand came up towards him, a familiar hand which contained that familiar seal. Oh no, you don't. He firmly grasped the hand, and crushed it, with only 2 fingers. What? Don't like it that I'm going to harm the humans? Well, fuck you. I'm a god, this is my planet. These humans are living on my property and they owe me millions of years of overdue rent, bitch. So go deal with it in limbo. With that, he tore apart Hagoromo's chest and clutched the man's heart. Forcibly opening all the man's tenketsu, chakra points, he drained the rest of the man's chakra and life force, effectively killing him. He whispered one last thing in the dying man's ear. Oh, and you know what's funny? Even if you had perfected the seal, it wouldn't have worked. Permanently ridding one's chakra only works if you first steal their life force. Otherwise their chakra would just recover in time. The man would have widened his eyes in surprise if he wasn't dying. But before the man completely died, he tapped the 2 special eyes in the dying man's possession with his chakra-enhanced fingers on the other, free hand. It was time to take back what was only meant to be his. Absorbing them, while ignoring the Otsutsuki's rather pathetic scream of pain, he could feel the changes in his own eyes. He could feel this so-called Byakugan slowly change its properties as it morphed into a purple eye with several concentric rings. This devolved version of the Rinnegan was significantly weaker than the original eye, the true Rinnegan. Evident from the fact that it also missed the Tomo patterns on the rings. Just because he doesn't have the original Rinnegan does not mean he can't cause natural disasters. You only need monstrous amounts of chakra. The Rinnegan just makes it easier to do so, but he can't change dimensions and spacetime, aka reality, without the true Rinnegan. Kagaya can't control reality freely, but she can change dimensions. There is a difference. Being able to control reality is like controlling every aspect of it, which includes life, physics, and basically the fundamental laws of the universe. Which is why the Shinju is OP, because in his true state, he could basically wipe oxygen away from existence, effectively killing everyone in the universe in mere seconds. He could no longer feel the power inside his body that he required to control reality. At best he could access the basic 6 paths. It was a good thing Kagaya couldn't do shit to hurt him, because the closer he was to her the easier it was to absorb her chakra, even without physical contact. Suddenly he felt the heart of Hagoromo ceasing to beat. The human stopped moving. Hagoromo was dead. Today, 2 members of those blasted Otsutsuki have died, 1 more to go. Good riddance. He released his grip on the man's still heart and let the deceased Otsutsuki fall lifelessly onto the ground. The former Otsutsuki had dried up into a husk and had disintegrated into ashes from the lack of life force the moment the carcass had touched the ground. Kagaya Otsutsuki would meet the same fate. The only reminder of their battle was the destruction they had laid waste to over the barren land, and Hagoromo's sword. It was a simple design. During his spectating of the battle, while he was locked deep in his own subconsciousness by his own primal urges, he didn't see the sword in action at all due to Hagoromo being busy getting knocked around and making his seal. Yet the blade, the quality of that metal was similar to his own. In short, it was a splendid blade. He picked it up. He delved deeper into the memories of the body he possessed. Amongst the memories of the Otsutsuki brothers' childhood and their many mock battles in preparation for his oncoming. Suddenly the name of this sword in his grasp came to him. Newfound knowledge obtained by Himura's memories. The Sword of Kusanagi. Hey, a fine name indeed, for a human sword. It would make a fine addition to his collection of weaponry. Right alongside his favorite, the Sword of Tatsuka. A.N. The Sword of Tatsuka won't be an ethereal jar with the liquid inside as the blade. Just imagine it as the Kurakara from Blue Exorcist, except it glows white with Naruto's chakra instead of blue every time. The Sword of Tatsuka, in this FIC, won't be able to trap anything it pierces, way too hacks. Instead it'll act like Samahata, where the amount of chakra it steals from its foes is equivalent to how much chakra Naruto puts into the blade upon its activation, unsheathing. He was about to teleport to the location of the biggest chakra signature he could feel aside from the 9 technically newborns next to him. Hold on a minute. He glanced over towards the 9-tailed animals. That Hagoromo bastard created these 9 from purely his chakra and a bit of earth. Shouldn't he take it back? He was considering it, but as he walked closer, the peaceful look on their sleeping faces combined with the familiar chakra signature emanating from their bodies, aka his chakra signature, made him feel warm in his metaphorical heart. They looked so innocent, so childlike, so adorable. It was kind of disturbing how giddy he was getting. But it just felt right. Besides, wasn't it wrong to rob these 9 children of their lives before they could even experience it? Granted, they weren't mortal due to being completely comprised of his chakra, but nonetheless they could have lives. Besides, he didn't really need their chakra. In time the chakra that was forcefully stolen from him would restore itself. Normally all his chakra would restore itself in a matter of mere seconds due to his infinite life force, but having it forcefully ripped from his body slowed the healing process, so it would take a while longer than usual. Despite that they had chakra stolen from him, they weren't the ones who wanted it. Granted, the humans were in a similar situation, in which they received their chakra without consent, so he wouldn't attack them immediately, but all restraints were off once they caught on that chakra could be used for war. This, he bet, would happen in less than 10 years max. But these 9 before him, they had the potential to be different from the humans. The humans were foolish by nature, so there really was no point teaching them like Hagoromo would have tried to do were he still alive. But these 9 could rise above human nature. They weren't human themselves. Without the inhibitions of human expectations and conduct, he could willingly teach them to be like himself. He was a lone being, too powerful, too transcendent to have a companion that would stick together with him until the end of time, which was never. It would be nice to have someone there for him, and now he was looking at 9 beings that could do that very same thing. He could, in all intents and purposes, be their older sibling, a sibling to guide them through the difficulties of life, a sibling to protect these 9 from human greed and prejudice. Right then and there, he made a decision. One that he made surprisingly quickly, yet at the same time would be the most important of his eternal life. He patted the fox with 9 tails and spoke softly. "I'll be your family." Still in a trance, with the far-off look in his eye, he didn't notice that all 9 newborns somehow heard his declaration and smiled, while rustling in their sleep as they enjoyed the newfound comfort in their dream state. Kagaya could wait. He had to teleport them to a safe and sealed location so that there was no chance of a human chancing upon them and using them for their greedy lust for power. 9 white chakra hands sprouted from his body as each hand clutched one of the 9-tailed beings. He seriously had to give them names. Being was not a fitting substitute. In the next moment, all 10 of them had vanished in a white blur. He had teleported everyone to a safe place, one that was recently safeguarded by seals as well as dragons. Well, they were here for a long time now actually. They were the second beings to ever exist, right after his unknown origins of birth. They had loyally served him and had guarded his resting place. That's right, this was the place that used to host the Shinju in all its glory as well as the habitat of the dragons. He had awarded them, willingly, with chakra after so many years of loyal service, and for generations, both old and young dragons respected him. Though they had lifespans reaching up to thousands of years, they were not immortal despite the atmosphere of this place being the most saturated with nature energy. Nature energy can extend one's life force, even more so than Ryuchi Cave or Mount Myoboku. This place. He and the dragons had coined it as the Island of Origin, the first landmark to ever exist alongside him and the dragons. It was full of taller than average trees, mountains, which were favored housing spots for dragons, and caves. The island was huge and was split into 4 sections, each forming a circular ring around the center similar to the Rinnegan pattern. The outer portion was the sandy area with water extending outwards almost endlessly to a normal eye, but that was an illusion produced by yours truly, aided by his mastery over spacetime. The third area was the forest area, and the second area was a series of mountains surrounding the center, the innermost area. The spaces between the mountains hosted rivers and waterfalls which focused into 4 points: north, south, west and east, which then flowed out into the sea that covered the rest of this private dimension. The innermost area was circular, and looked exactly like a grass plain, except it was filled with small flowers of varying colors like pink, yellow and red. There was a noticeable area in the middle which was rather flat. That flat area was where he used to rest in his Shinju mode. Yep, this would be a good place to raise the 9-tailed newborns. The dragons would protect them in the now improbable chance of any intruders. Not that they needed to, though Kagaya had once infiltrated this place to steal his chakra fruit using seals to disguise her presence from the dragons. They, however, no longer had to fear any similar intrusion, for he had set up seals ever since then in order to stop people like Kagaya from entering this place using any spacetime teleportation techniques, and he had warped this place into a different dimension that only he and the dragons could access. Eventually these 9 newborns would be able to do so too with his permission. Naruto-sama? He turned his head a bit to stare at an approaching dragon. A.N. The dragons are Chinese version. Long and usually have no wings unless you count a dragon like Slifer the Sky Dragon. Unless it's the Elder Dragon Sage, which has the typical winged, 4-legged form. This dragon, however, was special. It was the Elder Dragon Sage, Bahamut. Bahamut was the first dragon to ever exist and had a unique build in which he had wings and had 4 legs. The front 2 could act as arms. His chest and scales were more tough than most dragons since it was so much thicker. Despite normal dragons having a lifespan of a few thousand years, Bahamut has lived alongside him ever since the creation of the planet. Even now, after having millions of years, Bahamut was still young and in his prime. Bahamut had a lifespan so long that it was the closest thing to immortality in his books. Bahamut, can you look after them for me? I have to take back something that belongs to me. He pointed behind him in order to allow the dragon a better view of the 9 infants. Yes, Naruto-sama. Why do I sense vast amounts of your chakra from them? Not to mention I can suddenly sense thousands of different chakra signatures. Does it have something to do with why you seem weaker, Naruto-sama? Yeah, my battle with those Otsutsuki brothers had an unexpected twist. Seals are such hacks. Well, case in point, Hagoromo used a seal to steal half of my chakra and he split among the 9 behind me. I wanted to raise them as my family. Ah yes, you're going for that Kagaya Otsutsuki next, is that right? Yes. Very well then, I will look after them until your return, Naruto-sama. Very good, Bahamut. He turned around and approached the sleeping infants. He placed a seal on all of them. They were all chakra beings, they didn't have coils like that Hagoromo did, so that meant their entire well-being, status was entirely dependent on the state of their chakra. The seal he placed on them stilled the chakra circulation underneath their originally earthen hide. This would keep them in a permanent, sleep, state until he removed them. They would be asleep until he returned from getting back his chakra from that rabbit thief. It was finally time to kill that bitch. She could sense him coming. Her sons had failed. The seal had failed. He was coming, and she wouldn't be able to do anything to stop him. It was time to resort to Plan B. Banbutsu Sozo. Though nothing happened at first, the palm she had extended out soon shot out a jet black substance. The substance then formed into a jet black humanoid. Black Zetsu, it is time. Yes, mother. Naruto had been flying over the sea, making his towards the mountain range that hid Kagaya Otsutsuki from civilization. In the distance, he could finally spot the shrine in which Kagaya resided, near the top of the biggest mountain within dozens of clicks. Suddenly, he could feel a huge spike of chakra in the vicinity, but he had mistakenly guessed that the huge thunderclouds were the cause of that spike. Distracted by it, He didn't notice a jet-black figure leap out of the Otsutsuki shrine as it sank into the shadows of where it had landed, fading away ominously. As he looked upon the series of natural lightning coming his way, he smiled at this pathetic attempt to delay him. He was a god of nature. Time, death, life, oblivion, and badassery at its finest. Even with half his original power, absolutely no forces of nature, especially when it was produced by chakra, his chakra for that matter, could harm him. Even if the Rinnegan she possessed was superior to the one he was currently wielding, nature itself could not harm its creator. It could serve to delay or distract him, but it could never harm him. True, he wasn't in his body anymore, so that no longer held true, for the time being. But he still held his chakra, in amounts that Kagaya could never hope to match. Chakra that was used to create the planet itself. Chakra that served to be the origins of seas, continents, skies, lightning, fire, wind, earth and water. Chakra that would force these lightning bolts before him to submit to his will, not hers but his. The forces of nature itself obeyed only his command. That was the natural order. And he would make sure that it stayed that way, and no women with a god complex would steal that authority from him, no one. So send whatever you will to stop me. Nothing will stop my judgment. Nothing would stop these fists as they deliver to you the hammer of righteous fury. By the end of this day, that rabbit would pay for its insolence. I am sorry, but I will be skipping this fight, since it won't be much of a fight if I did write it. There will definitely be a Kagaya vs Naruto fight, maybe. Naruto-sama, welcome back. I trust that human has died a painful death? Bahamut greeted him the moment he teleported back. He couldn't stop himself from smiling. Of course she died. Nobody survives from fighting the primordial god. Though he did make note to get rid of that pest Kagaya had created just before she died. He didn't notice it before due to the interference of that thunderstorm, but when it all subsided, the presence of Kaguya's chakra, though a tad bit, originating from a position quite a whiles away from Kaguya's body, made it obvious that Kagaya had just activated some backup plan before he visited. What a pitiful last attempt to leave a remnant of one's own life, he scoffed. He could literally squash that jet-black pest with a thought. When Kagaya died, he had absorbed the chakra she had stolen from him via the fruit and regained the original Rinnegan pattern, albeit in his left eye only. That wouldn't be enough to control all the primordial entities, but it would do for now. At least the earth was now truly in his command once more. He could literally will the earth to squash, swallow, the pest whole. But he wanted to see the fruits of Kaguya's last plan. If he knew humans, which he did, it was probably some cliché attempt at reviving herself. Experience told him that god complexes usually go hand in hand with immortality obsessions. After all, what kind of god were you if you could die? Of course, that woman won't be bothering us for some time. For some time? Oh. A look of confusion followed by realization. Bahamut and the older dragons were just as knowledgeable about human nature as him. That, and he kind of had an emphatic link with the dragon summons. Yeah, give or take a few thousand years. Okay, you'd think they'd be more worried about someone who could bring the world to its knees being brought back to life, but not Tilda. Naruto could handle her any day, provided it wasn't on the day when he produced a chakra fruit, which was the human equivalent to taking a dump. Not even the primordial god could fight at full capacity when he was trying to release some excess chakra via the fruit. It was kind of a funny thought, really, to think someone as dignified as Princess Kagaya would eat his excretion. Naruto-sama, I am pleased to inform you that the chakra of the 9 infants you brought before have stabilized. They will awaken immediately after you have removed the seal. Good. It was time to be acquainted with his new family. It was a strange thought. Family, that is. Since the beginning of time, the first primordial entity he had control over, by the way, he was alone. For millions, billions, he lost count of years, though he liked to think it was in the millions, he was alone. The closest thing that came to family was the dragon summoning clan. In a way, they were like his children, Bahamut being his oldest son. Now, there were about 9 more additions to the family. Though it was unbecoming of someone of his stature, quite frankly, he was nervous. What would they think of him? How would he raise them? Did they even need raising? Or were they already embedded with the knowledge he had gained over the years? These next few moments would tell. Approaching the 9 cuddled-up infants, resting in a cave surrounded by the warmth of dragon fire, he intended to remove the seal. 9 white chakra arms sprouted from his back, each dashing towards the seal on each infant. As they made contact, he could feel the chakra imbued on each seal. Following this feeling, he had pulled on the external source of chakra and reabsorbed it. Unlike the mortal practitioners, his seals did not require ink to channel chakra, they were made of chakra itself. Without that source of energy, the seals on each animal quickly disappeared. He could feel it, they were awakening. The chakra of each being put together as it burst out into the open. It was quite an impressive amount, but it was raw in nature. Oppressive, untamed power. Their chakra was similar to his when he was in his berserk 10-tail state. It did not possess the soothing, warm, otherworldly quality of his natural chakra. That was probably going to be one of his main goals in raising them. To teach them how to control their power, how to refine it until it was similar to his. The 9-tailed one would probably be either the hardest or easiest to raise. 40% of his chakra was taken, a minuscule amount less than 1% going to the humans while the rest was placed inside the 9-tailed infants. Out of the 9, the 9-tailed one had the most of his stolen power, amounting to around 20%. The first one to awaken was the 1-tailed tanuki. It had the least amount of chakra out of the 9, so naturally it was the first to stabilize all of it and thus awaken. Mamoru. The tanuki groaned. What was weird was that it sounded feminine almost. These 9 were, internally, completely made out of chakra, so they didn't have genders like the mortals. But he guessed that in the foreseeable future he would be regarding the 1-tailed one as a female, if nothing more than for convenience's sake. Moog, who are you? Interesting, though, she seemed to be unable to talk. He could understand the intent behind her incoherent question. There must be some kind of mental link between them. But that was a thought that had to be saved for future reference. There was an infant that required his attention. Walking up towards the tanuki, he stretched out his arm. However, the tanuki saw his gesture as a threat. Instinctively, it took a step back. The rocks around him started to change into sand, sand that started to surround him. Looking at the tanuki, he saw that she was shaking a bit. Fear. I see. You have nothing to fear. He sent that message through their bond. The shaking lessened. One more push was needed, it seems. Pouring out his chakra into the atmosphere, the infant calmed down under the direct presence of his chakra. So, warm. Seeing that the infant was no longer shaking in fear, he reached out once again. Stretching out an arm, he petted her head. The tanuki nuzzled into his palm, clearly enjoying the warm feeling of his hand. Shikoku. That'll be your name. It was kind of uncomfortable referring to these 9 without any proper names. So that's why he would give it to them, as any proper parent would. A.N. Ichibi is female in this FIC, changed her name from Shukaku to Shikoku, and yes, I am aware that it is the name of an actual Japanese island. Shikoku made a delighted sound and nodded in confirmation, clearly liking her new title. He would have to teach her to speak in the future, as well as her other siblings if they required it. That being said, he had noticed the other 8 infants were waking quicker, probably due to exposure to his chakra. Slowly, one after another, from the 2-tailed cat to the 9-tailed fox, they awakened. They were in a pseudo-groggy state, but one look at their chakra told him that they would return to normal in a few seconds. One after another, they looked around checking their surroundings until their curious gazes fell upon him. He could only smile at them as he spoke to them, for the first time, warmly. Welcome to the family, my beloved children. A.N. Their relationship, at first, will be like of father and child. Some of the Biju will consider him as a father, some will consider him as an older brother, and a few will consider him as a lover in the future. It changes. -1,000 years later. Tu-san, come on, let's play tag. Gyuki, the 8-tailed octopus, cried out. He chuckled. It was a funny thought that such beings of immense power were playing such childish games. But that was a good thing. It was good to be innocent as long as you could. Though they had lived for 1,000 years, 99% of it was spent in isolation, which preserved their innocence, free from human influence. Alright, wait for me. It's been 1,000 years since the 9-tailed ones were introduced to his isolated family. The integration went smoothly, though the 9 were at first scared by the sight of the looming dragons. They learned to cope with it. Right now they were all running around, trying to hide from the scouting dragons who were also involved in the game. He could spot them easily with his Rinnegan, but they didn't need to know that. They had even resorted to hiding in their human forms to make it more difficult to spot them. Shikoku was a young caramel-tanned 12-year-old looking girl with long waist-length dirty blonde hair. Matabi, the two-tailed hellfire cat, looked like a girl of similar age, except she had sun-tanned skin with wavy blue hair that extended down to the shoulders. She still had sharp claws though. Kamehime, the three-tailed turtle, looked like a 14-year girl, with dark gray hair that covered one of her bright green eyes similar to her real form. Son Goku, the four-tailed ape, took the shape of a buff 20-year-old man with short orange-red hair. Kakuo, the five-tailed dolphin horse, was a 16-year-old girl with creamy white skin and hair, which extended down to her waist. She looked exactly like Matabi's human form except her hair was white instead of blue. Not to mention she had E-cup. Seiken, the six-tailed slug, took the form of a 17-year-old teenager with light purple hair. Chomei, the seven-tailed rhinoceros beetle, took the form of a 17-year-old teenager that looked similar to Seiken's human form except that his hair was a darker shade of purple and it extended down to his waist. Gyuki, the eight-tailed ox-octopus, was a 17-year-old teenager that was muscular but not as buff as Son Goku. His skin was brown while his hair took a lighter shade of brown. His form wasn't completely human as two blunt horns replaced what would have been ears. And last but certainly not least, was Kuromi, the nine-tailed fox. She took on the form of a 18-year-old adult with silky waist-length crimson hair and creamy white skin with F-cup. They all had slits for eyes with colored pupils that matched their chakra nature. They were also, all of them that is, wearing kimonos that were the same colors as that of their eyes and chakra nature. E.g. Kuromi was wearing a crimson kimono and had crimson slitted eyes. Kuromi turned towards him and shouted excitedly, "Come on, Naruto-kun. Let's run away from the dragons." She ran towards him and dragged him off to God's nowhere. Yeah, it was a peculiar relationship he had with the nine-tailed ones. Over the years, he had differing relationships with all of them. To Goku, Seiken, Chomei and Gyuki he was a father. To Shikoku and Matabi he was an older brother. However, to Kakuo, Kamehime and Kuromi, he was a desirable being. There was some quality he had that attracted them to him. It was something akin to how female humans would eye handsome males but nothing would come of it, yet. That feeling of attraction was also present in Shikoku and Matabi but not nearly as strong, so he chalked up to affection instead of love. They had started developing these feelings after he had taken them to visit the human world. One day they were curious of what laid outside and so they had asked him if they could visit the outside world. He too was curious of what the humans were up to now, though he had an inkling he wouldn't like it. In his prime, he had control over all primordial entities such as reality, illusions, time, space, life, death, limbo, oblivion, Mother Earth and etc. In his prime, he was able to connect with the planet itself on an instinctual level. Every moment that passed he could experience every action that the humans had experienced on his planet. Every drop of water, every loss of life, every inch of growth, every emotion experienced, there was absolutely nothing he could miss. Except for when he was taking a dump. However, with only 60% of his power, his control over these entities decreased. Sure, he still had control over all of them, but not to the degree he had in his prime. That's why he created avatars to assist with him controlling each entity. Such as the Shinigami, the avatar of death; Zetsu, the White One, the avatar of Mother Earth; Izanagi and Izanami, the avatars of reality; Amaterasu, the avatar of life, though for some amusing reason they coined it as a female sun goddess. Coincidentally he had joined her together with the sun, so it was a fitting title. Tsukuyomi, the avatar of illusions, though like Amaterasu they coined it as a male moon god. Also coincidentally he had tasked it to look after his real body which was placed in the moon, another creation of his. He didn't bother creating avatars for the other entities, his control over them were still at peak performance. Though his control over time was at an all-time low in comparison to the other entities. During his moment of weakness, taking a dump, Kaguya's actions had blurred the future. What used to be one linear future, thanks to his control over both reality and time, was now split into millions of futures, an amount that was rapidly growing over the years. The simultaneous flashes of 1,000 different futures gave him a headache. So with his control over space, time and reality, he was forced to create the multiverse, though only this universe, the first universe, contained the Shinju and the nine-tailed ones. Ever since then, the headaches stopped. Thank God for that. Another solution was taking back his stolen chakra and thus restoring his true Rinnegan, which would give him full control over the primordial entities once again. But nah, he had enjoyed their company over the years. He wouldn't be at 100% power for quite some time. Right now, his real body, the huge carcass sealed in the moon, had retained most of its chakra back and was now at 80% power. But going back to them, combined, the avatars looked after the outside world for him. Though he could no longer scan the entire planet, he could still detect a few huge bits and pieces around the world, not to mention he could still detect all his chakra despite it being tainted by the humans over the years. He definitely didn't like the frequent spikes and conversions of chakra around the supercontinent, which would later be coined as the elemental nations. There were only a few explanations to these chakra spikes, and none of them were pleasant. Together with the nine-tailed ones, they had journeyed to the supercontinent. They did not like what they saw, despite the new experiences they had gained from it. There was a fucking war. Oh, it wasn't the war that had bothered him. The bratty humans could do whatever the hell they wanted to in their free time, but his chakra was used as the weapons, his fucking chakra. He had one last thing to say before he went batshit crazy on the participants of the war. Nobody uses my chakra as they fucking please. If the tailed ones had learned anything from their visit to the outside world, it was that you never, ever pissed off the Shinju. Unfortunately for them, the humans didn't live long enough to learn from that lesson. Oh yeah, there were these two brats called Indra Otsutsuki and Ashura Otsutsuki that were leading the two sides of the war against each other. Guess what? They were the descendants of that stupid Hagoromo Otsutsuki. What a fucking coincidence. Of course, idiots beget bigger idiots. He could remember the massacre as if it was yesterday. Flashback. A.N. Hagoromo and Hamura had kids before they fought. So did Indra and Ashura. So the Uzumaki, Senju, Uchiha, Hyuga and Kagaya clan will still exist. Hamura will be the ancestor of the Uzumaki, Hyuga and Kagaya clans, while Hagoromo will be the ancestor of the Uchiha and Senju clans. Ashura Otsutsuki, a man with short, spiky brown hair wearing a light-colored kimono, was suspended in midair enveloped in a huge amount of golden chakra that was shaped into a battle avatar with black lining, 3 heads and 6 arms. The young Otsutsuki was facing off against his older brother, who was just across the battlefield. They were staring at each other, two warriors of similar power levels reading each other's heart. There was no doubt in the two warriors' mind. Battle was inevitable. Indra Otsutsuki, a man with long brown hair cut short onto with 2 locks wrapped on bandages on opposite sides, wearing a similar light-colored kimono to that of his brother, was likewise suspended in midair. Encased in a spiritual embodiment of his chakra that was just slightly bigger than Ashura's battle avatar, the man charged into battle as he sped across the battlefield towards his brother in the head of his gigantic Susanoo. It's the same Susanoo that Sasuke has after he inherited half of Hagoromo's powers. Likewise, preparing for battle, Ashura charged off at similar speeds as they prepared to clash. One moment, their avatars were about to collide, in the next. Boom! What? The two brothers said in synchro. It was like a horror movie, not that they even knew what it was. What stood before them as it intruded onto the battlefield was a collective force of nature that tore through their ranks as if it wasn't even there in the first place. In the horizon, all they saw was wood. Or more specifically, hundreds upon hundreds of wooden dragons sprouting out of quickly spreading forests. They tore through the ground and the two Otsutsuki's allies, minions, as the collective mass of nature came closer. Thunder roared as it came down to scorch the earth. All over the battlefield, bolts of lightning electrified the war mongrels, ultimately killing them. But that wasn't all. Between the trees rapidly sprouting of nowhere, huge amounts of water gathered up as it formed into a wave. A huge freaking tidal wave. They had never seen such a horrifying spectacle since, ever. The two Otsutsuki were forced to snap out of their shock as the insane natural disaster came upon them. Indra used his Susanoo. It grew wings as the older Otsutsuki flew out of the range of the attack. Ashura's avatar, unfortunately, had no such ability. So he was forced to endure. But not before doing something about it. Using all 6 hands, black spheres popped out as they all expanded in size. These were the truth-seeking balls that used senjutsu to combine 4 nature affinities. All 6 arms stretched to insane lengths as they expanded to collide against the huge forest, in a desperate attempt to stop it, slow it, anything. His attempts bore fruit at first, his 6 attacks blasting the forest areas to bits as it inched further away from him. But the tidal wave gathered behind the initial onslaught of wood was now headed towards him. Quickly, in response, Ashura gathered chakra into 2 of his avatar's palms. 2 golden chakra swords appeared. Raising them up in a grand gesture, he swung them down as 2 waves of chakra split the wave apart. He was safe from that now. Indra was looking amazed by the entire spectacle. Not even he could gather enough chakra to amass an attack of this magnitude. Even now, his Susanoo was protecting him from the bolts of lightning, if only barely. As he saw the wave, he spotted something that shocked him. There was a 6-armed golem riding the wave. It had peculiar fiery lines running across the wooden exterior, but nonetheless a huge freaking golem was riding a wave. His surprise prevented him from noting the attack Ashura had just used. But as the wave was split apart, the golem jumped. It literally jumped, for God's sake. How the heck does a golem use water to jump that high? Never mind that it was undoubtedly heading towards him. Forming a sword, he tried to cut through the rising golem. Only for that particular golem to punch right through and into his Susanoo's face and then right into him. Caught off guard, he spun around in the air as his spiritual avatar did somersaults like mad. Unable to regain his composure in time, he didn't notice the golem soar above his Susanoo as it majestically flew over him, arms raised. When he did finally regain his composure, it was too late. The golem above him gathered natural lightning into all 3 left arms as it dove down towards him. At that moment, 3 continent-shattering fists impacted with his Susanoo. One fist embedded right below the chin, another embedded in the chest, and the last embedded in the stomach area. It was way too much for him to handle. One moment his Susanoo was hit by 3 lightning-enhanced fists, the next he was falling down at a rapid pace, faster than the speed of sound. Just a few moments beforehand, Ashura, after he had dealt with the tidal wave, was ill-prepared for the forest that was hidden just right behind it. He shoved all 6 arms forwards in a last attempt to stop the forest, but he didn't expect 9 wooden dragons popping out of nowhere as it rammed into his golden avatar. All 6 hands were stopped at the wrist as 6 dragons, 1 each, bit hard on it. The other 3 dragons were free to ram into his avatar. The impact was powerful as it pushed him back several kilometers away. But that was the least of his concern. He couldn't feel it till moments later, but suddenly, his chakra was being pulled away, absorbed, at an insane pace. Whilst his avatar diminished in size, he was unable to defend himself or stop the wooden dragons from absorbing his chakra. But that concern was answered when the shadows below him seemed to expand as the sky seemed to darken. Looking up, he was scared out of his wits when his brother's Susanoo was crashing down towards him. Unable to move his avatar as it was wrapped in wood, he braced himself for impact. Soon enough, his entire center of balance was shifted downwards as he was forced to buckle under the gravitational pressure of his brother's fall, compensating for both of them actually. The impact was painful. They were downed onto the floor as their avatars were almost extinguished. Groaning in pain, they tried to restore their avatars. But that effort was for naught, for the incomprehensibly fast-paced onslaught of one continent-shattering attack after another was too much even for them to defend against. More so as the golem that was just above them also fell down as its 2 feet collided with both avatars, extinguishing what was left of the 2 chakra embodiments of physical and spiritual energy. Though the almighty stomps missed their real bodies, the shock waves that resulted from such a powerful landing blew them dozens of kilometers away. As they landed painfully, the 2 were now struggling just to survive, breathe even. They didn't even know who they were fighting against. Amassing their chakra once again, their superhuman life forces restoring their chakra at a rapid pace, slowly their avatars popped up once again. If it wasn't for their life force, they would have been goners by now after running out of chakra. In this FIC, the quality and quantity of your life force is a huge factor in the speed in which your chakra recovers. If that's what actually happens in canon, then, whoopee. But that's the only factor that their life force was helping in this battle: massacre. It kept them in the game, just barely, but they weren't any closer to winning. Not to mention, although they didn't know it yet, they were up against the Shinju. The Shinju had an infinite life force of immeasurable quality. It could fight a battle, well, forever. It could literally summon 1,000 meteors simultaneously, each the size of the moon, and then after a few seconds of recovery it would be back to full power. Taking a closer look at their mysterious opponent, the golem wasn't entirely made out of wood. It was actually black in color, as several lines ran through it, lines that showed that the interior of the golem, internally, was completely made out of lava. It looked like a demon with its Oni-like face, charred black wood powered by molten rock as boiling smoke emanated from its mouth. 2 molten arms, another pair, sprouted from its back. It stretched towards both of them. On reflex, the two dodged it just in the nick of time. Taking this opportunity, the two closed in on the golem. The golden battle avatar formed 6 black spheres whilst the Susanoo formed 4 black swords. The golem's earlier momentum was gone. They could use this opportunity to counterattack. But as they came closer, wooden dragons popped out of the ground below their avatars. Wrapping itself around them, the two Otsutsuki noticed that these dragons were different than before. They had a lot more chakra than before, which was indicated by the pure white aura they emitted, as well as the white chakra that came out of its wooden eyes and from the sides of its wooden mouth. In a tilted stance with their arms outstretched, each holding their respective weapons, they were instantly stopped by the wooden dragons that were crushing them. Flaring their chakra, it only served to encourage the dragons to absorb their chakra faster. Their chakra was being absorbed at a much faster rate than what their life force could restore. But this chakra, it was so familiar to them. At the same time, they came to the same conclusion. This chakra, it felt like their father's, yet at the same time it felt like so much more. Who are you? Ashura was the first to ask the previously unspoken question out loud. Who dares to interrupt my battle? Indra continued. You Otsutsuki are a foolish bunch. It hasn't even been a dozen years and already you people are using my chakra for your petty wars. Just to clarify, it wasn't the wars that pissed him off. Years of watching humans wage war on his planet made him adjust to the fact that humans would always be stupid, violent creatures that desired conflict as if it was a drug. As far as he was concerned, they could do whatever stupid shit they wanted. It was the moment when they involved his chakra in their petty squabbles that the gloves were off. For the first year he was seriously contemplating just ridding the universe of sentient life, leaving only he, the tailed ones and the dragons alive. Not even the other animals that had just inherited his chakra would survive. But he had wanted to see if his chakra would at least be used for good for the first few years. In the first 3 years, they didn't do anything with his chakra. Nothing bad but nothing good either, and it wasn't as if he was in dire need of his perfect state that he would rid the universe of life altogether. So he allowed them to retain it. Figures. Not a dozen years later and they're already using chakra to fight wars. Bloody pests. Figures it was the Otsutsuki clan, again, that would be the cause. Contrary to popular and later on, future belief, the Otsutsuki were bloody stupid people. The 2 last pure-blooded Otsutsuki would die, it was a fact, on this day they would die. That being said, they were shocked by the all-too-familiar voice. Though it was a tad bit different, they had heard it for most of their youth. Uncle Hamura? Bingo. On top of the golem, the air became distorted as a white figure whirled into existence. Standing on top of the body was a Shinju-possessed Hamura Otsutsuki, not that they knew it yet. It can't be. We thought you died along with father in the battle against 10 Tails. Indra cried out in shock. Of course not, after all, I was the one who killed your father. He didn't elaborate that their uncle was already dead and that the Shinju was possessing the man's body, but he wasn't lying either when he said that he was the one who killed Hagoromo. He closed his eyes and opened it dramatically, revealing a pair of Rinnegan. They gasped in horror and shock. Obviously they had understood what he was implying. He had killed their father and took his Rinnegan. You blood traitor! Indra roared furiously, his Sharingan whirling, spinning rapidly out of control. Says the one who was just fighting against his own brother. You do take after me, after all. Naruto had just noticed the peculiar red eyes. It strangely looked like the Rinnegan, except it only covered the pupils and was a more weaker, corrupted version. Did it have the same capabilities as his Rinnegan though? Trapped by the wooden dragons, the Susanoo started to distort, twirling towards a single point. This technique, so that dojutsu has some control over space-time after all. He recognized it almost immediately. It was Kamui. Distorting himself, Indra vanished into thin air as he slowly appeared overhead. The teleportation time was slow, so Naruto concluded that Indra was still either an amateur or this was activated instinctively, resulting from his dojutsu responding to his rage. The look of fury that quickly turned to shock and then back to fury was not missed by him. Indra was clearly surprised by this new teleportation technique, but he didn't allow his surprise to get the better of him. Forming a thread of rings, each containing 3 Magatama, Indra threw them all at his golem. It was a pitiful spiritual attack. He didn't even attempt to dodge it, instead he just stood there and took it all. After the smoke cleared, Indra was pissed to see that his traitorous uncle was still alive. Ashura was still shocked that his favorite and only uncle killed his father. Only now did he allow himself to take action. Turning his battle avatar off, Ashura was free from the confines of the wooden dragons and leapt towards his possessed uncle. The man's figure turned gold as he suddenly wore a golden cloak of pure chakra, black linings here and there with Magatama patterns etched on his back similar to his father's favorite white cloak. I see a more concentrated form of his battle avatar. The condensing of chakra was impressive compared to how much chakra they wasted using their huge chakra avatars. But to him, a chakra god, it was still pathetic. Ashura formed a shakuho composed of the same energies as the truth-seeking balls. Just for the shits and giggles and to see what Ashura's reaction would be after he had struck, he had allowed the young Otsutsuki to hit him in the face. Almost at the same, just a bit slower, Indra's Susanoo had dove down swinging all 4 swords at him. He had expected that and used 3 of his lava, wood golem's arms to block the overhead attack. Needless to say, Ashura and Indra were shocked to see that their attacks were stopped so easily, or in Ashura's case, endured through. Laughing a tad bit, he used the rest of his golem's arms to grab onto the swords to throw Indra away while he cocked back his fist and punched Ashura in the stomach. As he expected, mortals were still so fragile. As soon as his fist came into contact with Ashura's ribcage, the left side of it that is, he could literally feel it shatter in a matter of milliseconds. From the impact, Ashura, in the next moment, was sent flying faster than the speed of sound. A long distance away Ashura crashed against one side of a mountain. The landing caused the mountain to break apart. His punch was just that strong. If he was in his prime, his chakra-enhanced punch could probably split the planet in one fell swoop. This was getting pretty tedious. Sure, he could end it pretty quickly. Sure, he could just use his dimension-hopping abilities to pick them off one at a time. But he wanted to see the mortal brothers despair after seeing that they were entirely outclassed in the one area they had specialized in, brute force. Ironically, now that Ashura was out of the way, he could deal with Indra personally. He was interested to see how this red dojutsu fared in comparison to his Rinnegan. Come at me, boy. There was no need to be wordy for this battle. He knew this and the brothers knew it. Though he didn't babble on and on simply because he wouldn't, the 2 brothers, however, couldn't. They had to focus all their efforts on merely surviving despite the fact that he was toying with them and worst of all, they actually knew it. Their chances of surviving were dim, remarkably so. A spike of spiritual energy, interesting, so that Indra boy is using Kamui now. His lava, wood golem charged as did the black Susanoo. 2 of the golem's arms went right through the Susanoo as Indra swung 2 swords at his golem. An amateurish mistake. Indra was surprised when the sword passed straight through the golem whilst its arms were still passing through his Susanoo. His surprise transformed into shock when his Susanoo was suddenly hit by 2 of the golem's other fists. When he recovered he could only stare at the golem. What? How? Want to know how, boy? Fuck you, that's how. No fighting veteran would use an experimental technique in the middle of a life and death fight. The boy should find these things out for himself. Bloody stupid humans keep on using shit that they weren't familiar with. Hagoromo and his use of senjutsu without even knowing about it was one example. This Indra boy and his use of an advanced space-time technique was another. Contrary to what Indra seemed to believe, and what future Kamui users believed, the Kamui wasn't invincible even during activation. The Kamui was an advanced space-time technique that allowed the body to simultaneously travel between the physical and spiritual representation of this realm, or in simple human terms, an alternate dimension if you will. Using the body as a medium, whilst in activation, the body would be split into a physical aspect and a spiritual aspect which would be placed into the physical and spiritual representation of this realm. When Kamui was activated, the physical aspect of the body would be placed into the spiritual representation of this realm, alternate dimension, when the body was under attack, which brought about the illusion that the body was intangible when in fact the physical body was only replaced by a spiritual copy of the body. This was where the weakness of the technique was revealed. When the body was in a state of so-called intangibility, you could still hit the body if the attack was purely comprised of spiritual energy. If one looked closer, the golem's 6 arms were covered in a black energy that took the shape of a gauntlet. That was manifested spiritual energy, which allowed him to still hit Indra's Susanoo despite him using Kamui. To say that Indra was angry from his response was an understatement. He was downright pissed off. Releasing a battle cry, Indra charged towards him once again. Except this time, he could feel 3 subtle layers of illusions attempting to affect him. He shrugged it off rather easily. The boy was learning, but it was still useless in the end. The difference between them was greater than the distance between heaven and hell itself, a lot greater. The boy clearly didn't think that, so it was time to teach the boy exactly who was the apex predator in this situation. Lazily stretching out an arm, a single white chain appeared. The chain pierced the Susanoo and connected with the Sharingan user. He had no time whatsoever to react, when Naruto lazily yanked him out of his black avatar. He was being reeled in. In a last-ditch attempt to save himself, he stared straight into Naruto's eyes. Tsukuyomi, Moon Reader. The sky turned red as reality darkened. But that was only for a moment. In the next the sky started to crack under the sheer pressure of his released power. In the next moment, the illusion was broken. The feedback caused Indra to clutch his head in pain. Naruto issued the golem to attack, and so one of its arms punched the entire body of Indra as he was sent crashing into the ground. That was the second knockout in this bloody fight. A spike of chakra. OMG, these guys were stubborn. Looking back to was the spot he had punched Ashura into, he saw the familiar gold battle avatar with all 6 arms in front of its chest. It was focusing all its chakra into one point. The black sphere was a highly condensed chakra bomb. Figures, why are all the most destructive techniques in the form of bombs? Using his golem, he sprinted towards Ashura. A wooden dragon's in tow, filled with white chakra as indicated by the glowing eyes and side of the mouth. As Ashura finalized his attack, he launched the bomb in his direction. He sent the dragon forward in order to counter the attack. It ate the bomb. Ashura became fucking hysterical. A wooden dragon had just ate his strongest attack, ate it for God's sake. It was even burping comically in the background as if mocking him as his opponent pressed on. The golem then opened its mouth as it spewed gigantic amounts of lava. Completely covered in lava for a few seconds, Ashura struggled to move forward. Eventually he ducked beneath the attack and then right below the golem, safe from the lava attack. Sending 3 simultaneous uppercuts, he missed as it followed straight through and missed the golem by a few inches. The golem then grabbed the avatar's neck as it flipped him overhead and then slammed him back onto the ground. However, the golem was then stabbed in the stomach area from behind. Indra's Susanoo had swirled in, teleported from behind. Half of its upper body had appeared before it had used its sword to stab the golem. Unfortunately, the surprise attack didn't faze it in the slightest. In some literal twisted fashion, the golem upper body had spun around, while the lower body stood still, and clotheslined the sucker. The Susanoo had crashed into a nearby mountain, but the opportunity Indra had provided was not missed by Ashura. Once again gathering chakra, the young lad focused all his chakra into one black ball as he shot it towards the golem's back. Unexpectedly, the golem ducked and avoided the explosion of the chakra bomb. "You're going to have to do better than that, I'm afraid. Then take this." Chakra Yasaka beads had struck the golem dead in the stomach area. Again, sending it flying away from Ashura's battle avatar. The spinning beads grated against the charred wood, taking off chunks. Suspended in midair, Indra with his fists, that had formed into a claw shape, quickly clenched. In response, The spinning Yasaka beads chopped the golem into half. Foolish boy. They didn't know what he meant at first, but something peculiar was gathering around them. Dust. Dust was gathering near the sliced wood lava golem. Everything was fine one moment, but then Naruto gathered wind between his palms and concentrated it into a sphere. The two halves of the golem turned red. The amount of dust increased. But it was two words that set off everything. Volcanic explosion. Boom. As the golem exploded, the flames produced were only enhanced by the release of the pressurized wind Naruto had created beforehand. Together with the dust, a dust explosion occurred, causing a gigantic mushroom explosion. For dozens of miles all one could see was smoke. In the center of the crater caused by the explosion, Naruto was trying to get some rubble off of him. Dang, I didn't think that this body would have survived that. His thoughts were backed up by the fact that there were multiple severe burns all over the possessed body, despite intense chakra reinforcement. His white haori was in tatters, but it was quickly being restored via chakra usage. Indeed, if that explosion were just a tad bit more explosive, this human body wouldn't have lasted. Even with chakra enhancements, it didn't change the fact that human bodies would always be naturally fragile. Hagoromo and Hamura, when they were alive, may have had fairly big chakra levels to the point where they could summon meteors and use the elements in battle. But that didn't change the fact that they could be killed by a simple sword being stabbed through their hearts. In his real body, he didn't need to worry about such trivial mortal problems. His entire body was so naturally hard that he could survive being hit by a meteor the size of this planet, and so naturally resistant to the elements that not even swimming in the sun could faze him. If you were to make a comparison, Naruto's skin would survive a barrage of punches from a really pissed off Superman whilst only receiving minimal damage, and that's without chakra enhancement. Which was why he was starting to like using a human body. Yep, that's right, he was starting to like using a human body to fight landscape-changing fights. It made things challenging. Whereas his body could finish any human opponent off with a flick of the fingers, this body was harder to move, it was way too fragile, it was mortal and extremely vulnerable. In this body, he didn't have his infinite life force and an abundant amount of chakra anymore. He had to make do with a body that could only muster enough chakra to match Gyuki at best. Not to mention that fights would last a lot longer. Yep, he was definitely going to be using mortal bodies to fight from now on. It made things a tad bit more interesting. Which bring you to the question, if Naruto had to fight with only Himura's level of power, why was he so much more better at fighting in comparison to Hamura? Simple, because Hamura, Hagoromo and Kagaya were complete amateurs at using chakra. Sure, they could use landscape-changing attacks with ease, but that was because of the chakra fruit's influence. Whenever they were using chakra to do an attack, they wasted way too much chakra in doing so. There was one simple fact when it comes to controlling chakra. Willpower is the main factor in channeling chakra. That was why he could cause natural disasters with minimal chakra, because he had willpower in spades. Now it was time to collect the life forces of the last two Otsutsuki. Together he would have the life forces of 5 Otsutsuki: Kagaya, Hagoromo, Hamura, Indra and Ashura. Perfect, they would be perfect for his plan. Walking over to Ashura and Indra, who had been blown away and landed next to each other, he clutched their hearts. Good riddance to the Otsutsuki. End flashback. The sun shone when the two Otsutsuki had been defeated. It was a pleasant day, back then. Until he heard that their descendants were taking in the footsteps of their ancestors. Bloody fucking half-blooded descendants. He took a field day, he had enough dealing with their stupidity. It was time to release some frustration on the multiverse. Sealing his real body inside the mortal body, he didn't care that by doing so the mortal body would decay faster. He opened a dimensional rift and went on an apocalyptic spree. He was so pissed off that when he traveled throughout the multiverse he had created, he had annihilated 137 different universes. Of course he had restored them, only to destroy them again and again and again until it was only at his 7th time traveling across the multiverse that he had stopped. He was so pissed that he didn't care that releasing so much chakra at once was detrimental to the mortal body's health. When he had returned, his body was already decaying rapidly. His plan had to be enacted soon. Hopefully, they the nine-tailed ones would take the news well. Not bloody likely, but still it wasn't like he was going to be gone forever. But they still tended to overreact. Oh well, let's just wing it. Entering the cavern, he used his chakra and placed a palm on the ground. 9 huge bodies of smoke suddenly appeared. Father, what's going on? Son Goku was the first to ask. They were still in the middle of playing. Father never disturbed their playtime unless it was something really, really important. This body is dying. Naruto decided to be blunt about this, so he dropped the proverbial bomb instantly. Wah? They all cried out in shock. Daddy, don't die. Seiken jumped onto him and hugged him for dear life. A tick mark appeared on Naruto's forehead. He smacked Seiken on the head. I'm not dying, you idiot. Huh? Seiken actually forgot. This body is the only thing that's dying. I'll still be alive, remember? This body was never mine in the first place. Oh yeah, he forgot. He smacked Seiken on the forehead again, though a tad bit softer. Don't surprise us like that, Dad. Son Goku cried out. What does that mean now, NYA? Are you going to use your real body now, NYA? Oh, please use your real body, NYA. You're so much more handsome in that form, NYA. Matabi purred in her human form. Her verbal tick was still evident, though his lessons had decreased her usage of them in her sentences by a lot. I'm going to create a new body using this, of course. He took out a vial of blood. Of course, with their keen senses they could smell something familiar about it. That blood. It smells like the Otsutsuki except, more pure? Shikoku guessed. That's right, that is because this right here is Kagaya Otsutsuki's blood. They gasped in shock. They knew exactly who that woman was because he had told them about her in stories. Speaking of Kagaya, after the battle with Indra and Ashura, he had detected the presence of that black sentient nearby. Unfortunately for it, Zetsu had knowledge about most things that happened on this planet. Zetsu had snuck up on the black sentient and had took control of it. They were melded together. Zetsu had confirmed his suspicions that this black sentient had a remnant of Kaguya's consciousness. Of course, now that Zetsu had overridden the black sentient, Kaguya's consciousness was now suppressed. I had tamed it when I had killed her. After all, though it was a minuscule amount, she was the only one who could handle my chakra without decaying due to the chakra fruit. Her blood would be useful for my new body. That being said, he had created a body using a vial of Kaguya's blood beforehand just to see something. He had injected the body with some of his chakra and in time, the body had exploded due to sheer overload. Even with the chakra fruit increasing the tolerance towards his chakra, a human body could only handle so much. He had injected about 10% of his total chakra before the body had exploded. Again, humans are way too fragile, that and he was way too op. Don't worry, I'll model this body after my real one, okay? Yippee, could be heard from Matabi. So what will happen to you now? Kamihime asked with concern. I must abandon this body. When do I need to ask a favor of you, Kuromi-chan? Anything, Naruto-kun. When I abandon this body, I will be vulnerable. I was hoping to seal myself in your body and rest. Me? Why can't you just use that body? Oh, because I have something special planned for it. Come, I'll show you. All 9 of them followed Naruto. They walked on until they reached the end of the cavern. Here, there lay a circle containing 9 Magatama. In the center there were 2 torches surrounding a sealing circle. What's that sealing circle for, father? Chomei asked. You'll see. The seal was actually a chakra stabilization seal. If anyone was placed under a genjutsu or their chakra was being toyed around with, then this seal would prevent that. True to its name, it stabilized the flow of chakra, which meant if one was wearing it, all their techniques would be flawless. It also helped in containing chakra within the body, which was how he got to 30% before the previous body exploded. Creating 2 separate orbs of energy, in each hand, one blue and the other red. He then joined them together with Kaguya's blood. In several seconds, a small seed had appeared. It had several chakra signatures, but what was most prominent was the Mokuton chakra. Now, one last step. Placing the seed in the center of the sealing circle. He meditated. Eventually, 4 different sources of chakra came out of his body. There was a golden spirit, a black spirit and 2 white spirits. These sources of energy had taken shape into the people that had formerly possessed it. But that was merely a visual representation. He had completely deconstructed the residual consciousness that had resided within their life force. Now these 4 energy sources were merely life forces that had formerly belonged to powerful people, nothing more, nothing less. Is that Are those the life forces of those Otsutsuki people you killed? Kuromi asked. Yep, the powers they formerly possessed will be the foundations for my temporary body. Why can't you just take some flesh off your real body and use that as the skin for your new body? That's because I'll be way too OP. I want to make things more challenging. I don't really get it. Don't worry, when you spend several thousand years watching how weak the humans are, you'll understand. Okay. Slowly the life forces of the 4 Otsutsuki were absorbed by the seed. The chakra the seed possessed grew exponentially, until the amount matched Ashura Otsutsuki's. Maybe the seed was a bit too OP even for the humans. He couldn't help but sigh. There's not as much chakra as I thought there would be. Kuromi commented. That's because the seed hasn't fully matured yet. Which is why this seed will be stored inside a human. What? All of them yelled at the same time. I will hypnotize one of Hamura Otsutsuki's descendants, preferably the Uzumaki since they inherited the man's chakra, into eating the seed. Inside her womb, this seed will transform into a baby and in time that baby will be integrated into human society without anyone even suspecting that the Shinju is among them. But it will take time, 2 millennia maybe. During that time period the seed will pass on to future descendants, all of whom are destined to be female. When the proper time comes, when the seed is ready to mature into a body, then and only then will the next descendant be a male. Then what happens now? Kuromi asked worriedly. She had an inkling of what he was planning. She didn't like it. Over the years, she had come to love this place, especially because Naruto was here. He was what made this place home. The feeling was mutual amongst her siblings. They loved Naruto dearly and he had been a constant present in their lives. They wouldn't be used to him disappearing even if it was only temporary. He seemed to understand her concerns and patted her on the head. Don't worry, I'll always be with you. Here, I'll teach you a technique that will connect all of us forever. Transform into your real forms please. They all transformed into their tailed forms. Close your eyes and meditate. Feel your surroundings. Disregard it and picture yourself plunging into the bottomless sea. Imagine yourself sinking further and further down the sea, until you reach a door. Exert your chakra and picture yourself opening that door at the same time. Something changed, clicked. Now, open your eyes. They did and what they saw shocked them. No longer were they in a cave, no longer were they in the dark. Now, they were on a blanket of water that stretched on, well, forever. The skies were clear as each one of them were looking down at a reflection of themselves. This is what happens when you travel beyond your subconsciousness. We are all connected, because you were originally a part of me. It is because of that that this mental realm exists, one that we can all access. I don't understand, Father, why do we need this? Gyuki asked. Here it comes. Because I can no longer be with you. A wave of sadness, despair, then anger. What? Why? Don't worry, I won't be gone forever. Remember, I can't die. Then, why will you be gone? I'll also be injecting Himura's life force. Without a body my spirit won't have a place to go. That's why I'll be resting inside Kuromi. Kuromi blushed. Perverted girl, why don't you just use your real body? Things would be so much easier. Because I want to give the humans one more chance, one last chance. They were confused at his confession. Right now, as we speak, they are waging wars with my chakra. I want to show them the error of their ways. You can force them to not fight by using your real body, your real power. No, true, the humans would stop fighting if I forced them to. But they need to learn this for themselves. They need a fellow human to show them that peace is possible and I can't do that as a god. But, does that mean we can't you see again? No, I promise that the moment I am in full control of my mortal body that I will find you again. I promise that we will be a family again. Promise? Shikoku asked shyly. Promise. Then what are we going to do now? With Naruto gone, they were lost. You can stay here, I've already told the dragons, they will take care of you. But you're grown up now, I have faith that you will be responsible for your actions, so your future is entirely up to you. Then can we go with you? Go where? To the human world. Oh, we want to learn more about the humans while you're gone. Can we, Father? Are you sure? You may not like what you find out about them. Maybe this was a good thing. Over the years they were striving to be like the humans. Maybe during this time period they would finally see the truth. The humans are greedy by nature. They'll see you as nothing more than a powerful tool just waiting to be captured and used. Are you sure you still want to go? They seemed to be disheartened by the last bit hut. Nonetheless they continued. Don't worry, we'll still go. Then promise me you'll be careful. The chances were extremely that a human could match them in power. Even Shikoku, the weakest of them, who only had about 0.5% of his chakra, was still stronger than all the humans from what he could sense. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.